We continue with lesson 3 of redemption. We have begun the progression of this doctrine, and we've looked at Joseph and seen him as the redeemer of the children of Israel, providing for them in Egypt and preserving them in the famine. Already we have widened our thinking on this doctrine, and this doctrine is starting to get exciting now. We've done the foundation to it, we've put the principle in place, and as we come to the progression, we see the doctrine opening up for us. It's certainly not a doctrine that's hard to find or that's hidden. God in the Bible reveals himself to us, and he doesn't try to hide from us the truths that he wants us to know. So we're talking about the children of Israel, and they've come down under Joseph and settled in Egypt, and they begin to multiply. 70 people are there for the start, and that's all there is of the children of Israel. And time goes by and they begin to multiply, and they multiply for 430 years. And by then, there's 600,000 men, so there's well over 2 million of the Israelites by the end of this time. But over this period of time, many changes have taken place to their situation. When they came down under Joseph, they were honoured and privileged, and they were welcomed. But as time went on, things changed dramatically. And now we're coming after 430 years to the time of the Exodus and the Passover. And this is where we see this doctrine of redemption firmly set in place with all the different aspects of it brought out. We'll just read Exodus 1, 8 to 14, and it'll explain the situation at this time in history. Now there arose up a new king over Egypt, which knew not Joseph. And he said unto his people, Behold, the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come on, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And it come to pass that when there falleth out any war, they join also unto our enemies and fight against us, and so get them up out of the land. Therefore they did set over them taskmasters to afflict them with their burdens. And they built for Pharaoh treasure cities, Pithom and Ramses. But the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied and grew. And they were grieved because of the children of Israel. And the Egyptians made the children of Israel to serve with rigour. And they made their lives bitter with hard bondage, in mortar and in brick, and in all manner of service in the field. All their service wherein they made them serve was with rigour. So the children of Israel came down into Egypt. They've been there for 430 years. They know nothing but Egypt. They've been there for generations now, right? They have all been born there and grown up there. For generations they've been there. Egypt is all that they know, and they are slaves in Egypt. The situation has so changed from when they first came down that now Pharaoh and his armies have enslaved them, and they can do nothing about it. Pharaoh is their slave master. He sets taskmasters over them, and they work. They are in cruel bondage, and there's no way they can get free from it. Their life is full of labour and hardship, and so they are crying out for salvation. What they want is to be free from the slavery of Egypt, but they want more than that. They want to get out of Egypt altogether. They know that God has promised them a land in the land of Canaan, and they want to get out of Egypt and go there to the promised land. To get this freedom, they have to deal with their master Pharaoh, and Pharaoh has no intention of letting them go free. They are actually creating enormous wealth for Egypt, and Pharaoh wants them there. So what are they to do? Well, all they can do is cry out to God for mercy. They can't do anything about the situation themselves, and so they cry out to God for mercy. And we see that God is a merciful God, and God judges Pharaoh. And it's in this matter of judgment that we see a wonderful picture of redemption. God sends Moses to deliver Israel and lead them out of Egypt to the promised land. And God calls Moses and he says, go down to Egypt and tell Pharaoh to let my people go. And Moses goes to Pharaoh and he says, God has said, let my people go, that they might serve me. And Pharaoh refuses to let them go, and he adamantly refuses. And so God begins to judge Pharaoh. Now, God intended to judge Pharaoh. And before it all started, we know that God intended to judge Pharaoh. And so God begins to send the plagues on Egypt. And he sends different plagues, frogs and lice and hail and flies and darkness, all sorts of different things. Now it's significant what God sends as plagues on Egypt. Most of the things have to do with Egypt's wealth, their military power, and also with the gods that they serve. And it's an interesting study, and you can just have that in the back of your mind. But God sends plagues. He sends altogether 10 plagues, and that's typical that God would send 10 plagues, because that's the number of completion, 10. And so he sends the first 9 plagues, and each time Pharaoh just refuses to let the people go. He hardens his heart, it says, and he doesn't let the people go. And then we come to the last plague, and Moses comes to Pharaoh and he said, look, God is going to send one more plague and then you'll let the people go. And this plague is going to be the death of every firstborn son in the land of Egypt. Now this judgment was on all Egypt, and the life of every firstborn son is to be forfeit. And this applied to everyone in Egypt. It didn't only just apply to the Egyptians, it applied to the Israelites as well. And so we say, oh, is God going to kill all the firstborn of Israel? Well, no, of course he's not. God provides a way that the forfeited life of every firstborn son can be brought back. Now, it's interesting, this was widely known, and it applied to the Egyptians as well. They could have saved the lives of their firstborn sons had they followed the instructions given to the Israelites. But God, in his mercy, provided a way that the forfeited life of every firstborn son could be brought back, could be redeemed, ransomed. And it was by the Passover lamb. And we find out about the Passover lamb in Exodus 12, and we're going to look at this Passover lamb once again. We've looked at it in atonement, and we looked at it in substitution. Very much we need to get an idea of it here when we're doing redemption. What do we know of the Passover lamb? Well, we'll just read and see as we go through. And the Lord spake unto Moses and Aaron, this is chapter 12, in the land of Egypt, saying, this month shall be unto you the beginning of months, it shall be the first month of the year to you. And so they start a new calendar at this stage in history. And then Moses said, speak unto all the congregation of Israel, saying, in the 10th month, in the 10th day of this month, they shall take to them every man a lamb, according to the house of their fathers, a lamb for an house. So it was selected on the 10th day. And then we see, we'll read on, and if the household was to be too little for the lamb, let him and his neighbour next unto his house take it according to the number of the souls. Every man according to his eating shall make your count for the lamb. Your lamb shall be without blemish, a male of the first year. Ye shall take it out from the sheep or from the goats, and ye shall keep it up until the 14th day of the same month, and the whole assembly of the congregation of Israel shall kill it in the evening. So it was selected on the 10th day, and it was examined for 3 days to see if it was a fit lamb, if it met the criteria. We saw in verse 5, it must be without spot or blemish, it must be a male of the first year, and then it was to be killed on the 14th day, and they shall take the blood of it and strike it on the 2 side posts and on the upper doorpost of the house wherein they eat it. Right, so its blood was to be taken and struck on the doorpost and lintel of the houses. Verse 7. Now that is significant. It's struck on the doorpost and on the lintel. So it's vertical and it's horizontal. If you join the blood up, you've got the cross. And this is once more time when we see the cross in the Old Testament. We see it several times as we look through the Old Testament. And this is a very significant place that we see it, because this is the blood struck on the doorposts. And so the Passover lamb was to become the innocent substitute, paying the stipulated price and redeeming the firstborn. An innocent, perfect sacrifice, dying for the firstborn. Now, it's very interesting when we look at this. Notice that the end result of all this, having the Passover lamb dying, the blood being put on the doorpost, the end result of it is not only to save the life of the firstborn, but it's to procure freedom for God's people. What was going to happen was that the angel of death was going to pass over, and when he saw the blood on the doorpost, he would pass over that doorway, and the firstborn son in that house would be redeemed. His life would be saved, would be ransomed and bought back. But more than that, what God was aiming at was freedom for Israel, for the whole nation. And it's interesting to note that this sacrifice, first of all, pays the ransom price and buys Israel, the nation, who are slaves in Egypt, and sets them free from the bondage and labour and cruelty of their slavery. Now that's very interesting. If we remember our Greek word agorazo, that we looked at when we started these lectures, this is exactly what that word means, right? And so this is what happens here. It procures freedom from the people and freedom in Egypt, and sets them free from the bondage and labour and cruelty of their slavery. But it does more than this. This sacrifice of the Passover lamb also not only sets them free in Egypt, but it made it possible for them to go out of Egypt altogether, to no longer be slaves in Egypt, to be free from Pharaoh, their slave master, who could never hold them captive again. Now, remember our Greek word exagorazo. This is exactly what that word means too. So that fits perfectly with that. But there's more to this. This sacrifice also paid the actual ransom price that allowed Israel as a nation to be released from Pharaoh, from slavery, and from bondage. And so remember our Greek word latru, to loose. This is exactly what that word means. And then this sacrifice also changed the circumstances of the nation of Israel. It allowed them to be saved out of or from Egypt, from Pharaoh, from slavery, from bondage, from punishment, from cruelty, and all that went with it, right? Remember our Greek word apolutrosis? This is exactly what that word means. And there's even more. This is a wonderful thing. This sacrifice meant that instead of Israel being the possession of Pharaoh and of Egypt, they were now God's special chosen people who God promised to keep for himself and to protect and to lead and to provide for and to keep safe. Remember our Greek word periporo? It means exactly this. And so what a wonderful picture of redemption we see in the Passover. It's obviously another doctrine that God does not want us to miss. He just makes it so clear. And what a wonderful and encouraging doctrine it is that we serve a God who has promised to redeem us and to do all these things for us that he did for Israel. As we study this doctrine, it just gets better and better as we go. But what happened to the children of Israel? Well, judgment comes and the Lord executes his judgments. Verses 29 and 30 of chapter 12. And it came to pass that at midnight the Lord smote all the firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh that sat on his throne unto the firstborn of the captive that was in the dungeon, and all the firstborn of cattle. And Pharaoh rose up in the night, he and all his servants, and all the Egyptians, and there was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not an house where there was not one dead. And he called for Moses and Aaron by night and said, Rise up and get ye forth from among my people, both ye and the children of Israel, and go serve the Lord as ye have said. Also take your flocks and your herds as ye have said, and be gone, and bless me also. So, what is the one factor that redeems the firstborn of Israel that isn't there for the Egyptians? What is it that makes the difference between the children of Israel and the Egyptians? When we boil it all down, it's the blood of the Lamb. The Egyptians don't have the blood, vertical and horizontal, on the doorposts of their houses. So God's people are redeemed by the blood, right? The blood is the proof of the life given. The blood is the guarantee that death has occurred. Exodus 12:13 says, And the blood shall be to you for a token upon the houses where ye are, and when I see the blood, I will pass over you, and the plague shall not be upon you to destroy you when I smite the land of Egypt. So it's the blood that makes the difference. The blood is the guarantee that death has occurred. So we see that redemption is by the blood of the Lamb. The blood proclaims paid in full. And that is the key to understanding this doctrine of redemption. Without the blood, there can be no remission of sins. As we go further on, just as we finish up here, we'll understand that as we go further on and we look in the law, it makes it perfectly clear that without the shedding of blood, there is no remission of sins. For there to be remission of sins, the blood must be shed. And the blood proclaims that the redemption, the ransom price is paid in full. And we'll leave it there.